Welcome, Shango Los.
Thank you all for having me here. I hadn't been to one of your meetings before, so I wasn't sure how formal it was. And now that I see how warm and casual it is, I think I'm just going to have a seat instead of standing up and pontificating. And now I also regret not wearing shorts. So my plan for today is to just go through a topical understanding of how cannabis relates to Parkinson's, and to tell you a little bit about how people here on Vashon are already getting relief from symptoms using very specific types of cannabis. So I want to be clear at the outset that I am not a doctor. I do not have formal medical training. However, I have been working with patients across the board, including Parkinson's patients, for the last 5 years. On my podcast called Shaping Fire, I interview the top doctors in the world on a range of health issues, including Parkinson's. And I have been working one-on-one with patients for several years now, so that I get to see and experience their individual experiences, because as we all know, Parkinson's manifests differently for different folks. So with that said, if you feel inspired by anything that I share with you today, please be sure to not drastically change your medicine or do anything drastic like that without checking in with your primary doctor. Don't make any big change just based on what I'm saying here today. The information that I'm hoping to share with you today is to supplement the research that you're probably already doing on your own, so that you have access to nice, clean information about Parkinson's. Because as we all know, if you look up any information on the internet, your mileage may vary on its quality. So in addition to being an educator of patients and doctors on how to use cannabis, or also known as marijuana, in the clinic, I also have a weekly podcast. And I'm also the founder of the Vashon Island Marijuana Enthusiasts Alliance. And originally, when we started the organization was going to be a trade organization for all of the medical marijuana companies that had started on Vashon. And there were over 100 of them, small cottage businesses that were supplying cannabis and edibles and oils and various products to the medical dispensaries across the state. But unfortunately, Washington has changed gears and dismantled the medical marijuana program in the state. And because of that, the companies, the cottage industries that had started on the island were no longer legal. And most of them didn't have the kind of money that it took to become a licensed company in the state, which, most people put between $250,000 and $500,000. So with that, the organization on the island transitioned to be primarily patient outreach and education. And we get together about every 6 weeks at the Grange Hall, and we have a guest speaker come in, really world-class speakers. And they'll come in and teach about either cannabis medicine or about the botany of the cannabis plant. So that's what's happening here on Vashon and who I am. So before I get into the specifics of both the precursors to Parkinson's and how cannabis can help, I want to jump to the end first so that you kind of know where we're going. What we're seeing on Vashon is very significant reduction in the symptoms of Parkinson's patients. And as you know, the most obvious help is in symptoms that are involved with motor skills. So tremors and stooping and muscle clenching, of all different muscle sets. And Parkinson's patients started coming to the meetings at the Grange Hall and asking questions, and then one way or another they were getting their hands on the appropriate cannabis medicine, which I'll talk about a little more later, and the results have been astounding. Much to my surprise, none of the Parkinson's patients I work with on the island are actually here, but maybe it's because they're already familiar with what I'm going to say today. But let me tell you about one particular patient which I think really, really stands out. So I was working with this fella, he's in his early 60s, and his Parkinson's had progressed to motor skills issues, and he had tremors in his right arm. He had muscle clenching that was causing his hand to stay closed most of the time. And the two that he really hated, he had muscle clenching in his back, which was causing him to stoop, and then caused him to shuffle. And he really disliked the shuffling because he felt that telegraphed to other people that he wasn't feeling 100%. And that changed the nature of the conversation people wanted to have with him. They didn't want to talk to him about just stuff. They wanted to talk to him about his stooping, and that annoyed him. And so his wife came to one of the meetings, and she got some more information, and then she was able to get a tincture for him and took it home. And you know, sometimes I hear back from patients and sometimes I don't. But I heard from her not 3 days later, and she came by my house, and she started with giving me a big hug. And I'm like, all right, well, at least I know this is a good meeting. and after giving me a big hug, she said, I've got to tell you what happened this morning. And she said, you know, my husband has just been getting worse and worse over the last few years, and you know, and with all the things that I already told you about. And she said, this morning, while I was preparing breakfast, she said, I heard the lawnmower for the first time in years. And she stopped what she was doing and she went outside, and her husband was mowing the lawn with a big smile on his face. And she went over and hugged him, and he turned off the mower for a moment, and they talked, and he said it was the first time in years that he was able to stand up straight and felt loose, that his tremors had entirely disappeared, at least for that moment, and he was not shuffling, and he was able to actually exert force through his human without losing balance, and was able to mow the lawn. And so even though they have a conservative-sized patch of lawn, it was obviously a big breakthrough for him. And now we're almost a year and a half after that day, and except on the rare occasion when he forgets to take his cannabis medication, he is nearly without any visual symptoms that you can that you point him and say, oh, he must have Parkinson's. Except for sometimes at the end of the day when he's tired, I'll be at their house visiting, and he'll have a slight tremor in his hand just from being, you know, exhausted from the day. But for them, it's been a wild success. And on Vashon, I would say that is a fair generalization of people's success. The two things that I have found that most impede people from having a positive experience with cannabis and their Parkinson's is, number one, just like with pharmaceuticals, each person is built a little differently, and it takes a little bit of time at the beginning of taking cannabis to find the right dosage and combination. So there's a little experimentation at the beginning, and some folks don't have the temperament or just patience for that. They want it all right now. They don't want to have to experiment. And gosh, when I recommend journaling, sometimes people just rebel right at journaling at all. But so some people, they get frustrated at the very beginning, say just like a week, to you know, dial in the appropriate dosage. And then second, you know, as we all know, there's still a lot of peer pressure against cannabis from people who know it more as a taboo drug from the early years, before we realize that actually it's an ancient herbal medicine that's been used by humans for over 30,000 years, and it's only been the last 50 years that we haven't been using it, and that is the extraordinary and odd part of our experience with it. We actually have a lot more of a history of using it every day for a wide range of health issues, instead of seeing it as a negative thing in our culture. So those are the two main reasons. Trying to dial in the dosage, and also just people succumbing to peer pressure from people around them to not use it, or occasionally people just don't feel good about it themselves because of what they've been taught. And to each their own. But I am here to offer you some information in case your mind is open to using cannabis medicine, how you might want to think about that, and how you could approach it for your best results. So about 25 years ago, we discovered a new system in our bodies that up to then had not been discovered, called the endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system is fascinating because it produces cannabinoids very similar to the ones that are in marijuana, in cannabis.
Our own body is producing them.
Correct. When our bodies produce them, they are called endogenous cannabinoids, meaning produced inside of the body. And when they're produced by the plant, they're called phytocannabinoids because they're made by photosynthesis and in a plant. But they're incredibly similar to each other. Well, our endocannabinoid system, which up to 25 years ago we were totally unfamiliar with, we now understand it to be the master regulator for some 24 of our body's systems. And it's amazing that something that would be the master regulator was unheard of for so long. It regulates, including in the 24 systems, are your likelihood for fight or flight, your response to things that might scare you and you need to respond to, appetite and digestion, your GI tract, sexual arousal, the mix of chemicals in your brain, which also makes sense that then it would also moderate anxiety and depression, your brain protection maintenance systems that we'll be talking about a lot today, and finally, signaling issues. For example, your toe reporting to your brain that you stubbed it. Now, when your endocannabinoid system gets weakened, there is now a scientifically determined name for this called endocannabinoid deficiency. And what this means is that you've got your endocannabinoid system, but your body is not producing enough cannabinoids in order to stay robust and run all of these different vital body systems. And what makes your endocannabinoid system weak is pretty much a definition of living in the United States. Things that can weaken your endocannabinoid system include stress, questionable nutrition, using pharmaceuticals, not getting enough exercise, and long-term anxiety or depression. So the idea is the more that your body gets taxed, the more likely it is that your body's not producing enough cannabinoids inside itself to take care of all of these systems. Also, not part of the conversation today, but also associated with cannabinoid deficiency is fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, and increased migraines. So, cannabis by itself is a neuroprotectant. And for years it was said that cannabis makes you dumb, and people who smoke pot are dumb, and they get more dumb as they smoke more. And even though we may all have some life experiences that may support that evidence, because we all know someone who's lazy and also smokes marijuana, there's also a lot of brilliant people who are very active and productive that smoke cannabis. And the way that cannabis is a neuroprotectant is because of two things. Number one, it causes neurogenesis. When you have enough cannabinoids in your system, your brain actually produces more brain cells. When I was a kid, I was told that once you killed a brain cell, that was it. You didn't get a chance to replace them. But modern science is showing us that that's actually not the case. We had just never done the studies on cannabis, which is one of the few things that cause the creation of new brain cells. Additionally, cannabis, working with the endocannabinoid system, helps moderate what is essentially the brain's self-cleaning and ability to take out the trash. And so what happens, and this is one of the things that gets a lot of interest from Alzheimer's patients, is that when your brain doesn't take out the trash regularly, plaque starts to build up on the end of the neural endings and the neural pathway, and it impedes communication between different neurons in the brain. And this is eventually what leads to Alzheimer's. Well, when you're using cannabis in the correct way, it kickstarts your endocannabinoid system, and that endocannabinoid system starts cleaning your brain. And for Alzheimer's patients, I get all this response of, I'm feeling brighter, I'm feeling lighter, I'm remembering more things. And similarly, we'll talk about more of this in a moment, but with Parkinson's patients, you're getting a lot of the same benefit, because Parkinson's disease is associated with compromised motor function after about 60 to 80% of the dopamine producing neurons are damaged. And so without the dopamine that's produced by these particular neurons, this leads to the physical attributes that we're familiar with Parkinson's. So what we want to do is we want to protect those dopamine producing neurons as much as we can. And the fact that the endocannabinoid system is causing our brain to clean itself, it can start to clean and repair many of these dopamine creating cells. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about on the symptoms aspect is that, I've talked a little bit about the classic motor symptoms so far, which is usually how you can identify someone third persons that they may have Parkinson's. But some of the other symptoms that are associated with Parkinson's, which might not be as visual, also can be remedied with low doses of cannabis as well, including decreased facial expressions, dementia, fatigue, sleep disturbances, depression, constipation, cognitive changes, fear, anxiety, and urinary problems. And what's interesting is if you look at this list, these are all mechanisms within the body that are moderated by the endocannabinoid system. And so cannabis can help you on two levels. On the first level, it can be a preventative, and it can also help decrease the symptoms that a patient is experiencing. But also, it can decrease the symptoms by strengthening the endocannabinoid system, so even if you still have Parkinson's, you won't have a degradation of your life quality. So, everything I've told you so far is strongly supported with scientific evidence of studies that are taking place in Europe right now. Because cannabis is still a Schedule I drug in the United States, those studies are not happening here. There's a new group of studies that are on their way, which are showing a lot of hope. And since, you all have probably, researched Parkinson's much more than I have, you're probably familiar with people starting to tie Parkinson's symptoms to what's going on in the gut, in the microbiome of your stomach. And so this new science is suggesting that when your gut flora is overly acidic and your endocannabinoid system is deficient, poor signals are sent between the gut and the brain, which can make Parkinson's even worse. And so one of the great things about using cannabis is that your endocannabinoid system moderates your gut. The mix of chemicals, the cleaning of the cilia that moves your food along, and your ability to extract nutrition from the food. And so while this is newer science than the other aspects I've talked about so far, I wanted to mention it because if you've been doing some work trying to, eat more raw foods, get rid of your GERD or heartburn, or just, work with the chemistry of your gut, cannabis is a good option for you as well because the endocannabinoid system moderates the tummy. So at this point, what we're looking at is the systems that moderate the symptoms that you're experiencing are all moderated by your endocannabinoid system. And so if most Americans are deficient in their internal cannabinoid making, what can we do to help? And that is with supplementation. By taking the phytocannabinoids that are produced within the cannabis plant and then taking them ourselves to make up for the fact that we're not producing as many cannabinoids ourselves. So let's talk about typical methods of dosing. So one of the things that I get a lot of pushback from patients especially when they're just learning about cannabis, is that they don't want to get high and they don't want to be smoking weed. And I get that, right? We've all spent a lot of our lives cracking jokes about stoners and about what that does to your life, and those folks get judged a lot, and none of us like to get judged. Well, except for a very small group of people who actually prefer the smoking for the enjoyment factor of it, and they like to get high while they're getting their medicine, I don't recommend smoking cannabis for nearly any of the symptoms that we're looking for relief from. I recommend that you take it orally, because when you smoke marijuana, you are inhaling it, it's going into your lungs, and the cannabinoids immediately jump from the lungs to your blood and then goes to your brain. And so you're getting all of the medicine fast at once. And the THC part of the cannabis is what makes you high. And so all of that reaches your brain at the same time. And at that point, you're feeling some level of disorientation. And soon after, we'll probably want to eat everything in your fridge. And so the process is different when you eat something, though, because it goes into your body, and if you're taking a tincture, some of it will soak in through your mouth. But if you're eating an edible, it's got to go all the way through your GI tract and get filtered by your liver, and then finds its way to your blood there. So any way that you take it orally you're likely going to get better experience than if you were to smoke it. Now, I'm not saying that smoking doesn't work. Smoking can work, but it's just not for everybody, and so we're going to focus on the solution that seems to be for more patients. So So if you're going to take it orally, then like what are your options? Well, we all know the classic pot brownie, right? And a lot of people find very good results with taking a regular diet of brownies. Now, I don't usually recommend that to patients that I work with because number one, they're a little better if you buy them at the store, but if you tend to make your own brownies at home, brownie 1 and 6 and 12 are all going to have different strengths because it's really hard to homogenize the medicine throughout the baked goods. And while they're much better at this, at the commercial level in stores, it's still not perfect, but it's certainly much better than, Grandma Mary's brownies who used to make them in San Francisco. Also, most of the patients that I talk to are trying to avoid extra calories, let alone to be taken as often as they would need to take something to help with their Parkinson's. So they're all like, I mean, 3 brownies a day, 7 days a week, I'm going to have to start a whole new exercise regime just to help mitigate the weight gain from trying to deal with my Parkinson's. So cookies and brownies and candies are not always the best solution. For some people, they find that they really like lozenges because there's not as much to it, there's no flour, there's less sugar involved. So there's definitely some good lozenge options. So those are the things that I would put in the kind of like a food category. Then the second category are capsules. So there are an increasing number of companies that make cannabis capsules that can be purchased in the recreational market. And I wish I could make a generalization and say you can't go wrong, or even to say that they're all bad, but it's neither. The recipes that are put into the capsules vary from maker to maker, which is a hassle. So, I'll talk more about where to purchase capsules and the like later. But at this point, I just want to say that the person behind the counter at a reputable cannabis store should be able to guide you to their products that are more medical than others. At its base, all cannabis is medicine. It's just that different people are using different kinds of cannabis for different conditions. So if you tell them that, listen, I'm looking for a capsule with very little sugar that's reliable for Parkinson's, with a little luck, the store clerk will guide you in the right place. So that's food, capsules, and then my favorite, which is tincture. And we're all familiar with tinctures of, echinacea or marshmallow root for the stomach. There's a whole range of tinctures that we can use that are made from taking the plant and soaking it in alcohol and then straining out the plant, and what's left in the alcohol is the essential constituents of the plant, its oils. That same thing works for cannabis. And in a very simple way, that's essentially how you make it. You take the dried flowers, you soak them in alcohol, you strain them, and then you hopefully lab test it, and then you've got a tincture. And people have been taking tinctures for hundreds of years. As a matter of fact, before cannabis was banned in the United States, it was the primarily used tincture for a whole host of human ailments, and it took up 70% of the pharmacopoeia, which is essentially the pharmacist's guide to what to give people, from everything from migraines and hot flashes to menstrual cramps and general pain. Just across the board, it was because it helped the endocannabinoid system, even though we didn't know that then. So what I also like about the tincture is that when you buy a tincture over the counter, and sometimes from neighbors, they'll be lab tested, and so you know that every time you take it, it's going to be exactly the same. Once you find what your correct dosage is for you, you'll be like, okay, I take 1/3 of a dropper. And so every time you take that third of a dropper, you know that the dosing is always the same. The other thing that I like about tincture is that it's variable. You've got a lot of control as the patient. When you're getting capsules, it's got a set amount of cannabinoids from cannabis in it, but every time you take it, you have to take the same amount. Well, as we all know, with lots of times you might want less of medicine on some days, or maybe you're feeling especially bad and you want to take some more on other days. And so tincture gives you that kind of flexibility, where once you find out what your baseline is, you can change it a little bit based on what you think your needs are for your day. So it just so happens that arguably the top neurologist in the country for cannabis and Parkinson's lives on Vashon. Dr. Ethan Russo lives just above KVI Beach here, and he's a friend, and he's been on my podcast a few times, and he's spoken at the Grange Hall a few times, and he's a very active member of the Fruit Club. So Dr. Russo sets dosages after speaking with a patient, but generally, this is a rule of thumb. He says that the threshold to start getting some sort of benefit is at about 2.5 milligrams of THC. And that THC is the part of cannabis which can make you feel high if you take enough of it. 2.5 milligrams, though, is pretty much not going to get anybody high. There are outliers, say maybe 1 in 2,000 people that might feel 2.5 milligrams, but in all of my years working with patients, I've only met one person. That is why I now have to say 2.5, because up to that point I had said that no one would, but then I met someone. So 2.5 milligrams of THC is where you just start to potentially get some medicinal benefit. He also says, though, and this is my experience, that the sweet spot of really starting to have a decrease in the motor skill symptoms is at 5 milligrams. Now, at 5 milligrams, some people may feel a little bit of something. Some people experience it as maybe a little bit of cloudiness. Some people experience it as just feel a little more relaxed. For those of you who have had alcohol, a lot of people, they'll have that cocktail at the end of their business day, which when it hits their blood, they're like, all right, the work day is over and now my time is my own. That feeling of relief is how a lot of people experience 5 milligrams. And then other people just experience 5 milligrams as, oh, the shaking has decreased in my arm and I'm not clenching as much. And so they don't experience 5 milligrams as something added, but more something that's taken away in their symptoms, right? There are many Parkinson's patients who will take 10 milligrams. And at 10 milligrams, just about everybody will feel some kind of response to the THC. More often than not, though, folks will like that experience. You're not full-on stoned and difficult to talk to and giggling and things like that, but you're definitely feeling some sort of sense of relief from your symptoms and probably a release of your day's stress, and occasionally, just occasionally, you might want to be a little more careful going to slap off the light switch on the wall, because it might take you a little more effort to zone into the target. But for the patients that I've worked with, the slight feelings of differentness that they get with that low dose of cannabis is well worth getting rid of the other symptoms that are causing them discomfort. Some of you may have looked on YouTube for videos of Parkinson's patients trying cannabis. And if you haven't, I recommend that you give it a try because it's really remarkable. One of the most popular videos is of this fella sitting on his couch at home, and he has got advanced Parkinson's with a range of severe motor symptoms that he's suffering through. And his buddy gives him a small amount of cannabis oil and puts it underneath his tongue. And the patient is playing with it in his mouth, so it's soaking in through his mucosal membranes in his mouth and his tongue and his cheeks. And they're running a timer at the bottom of the video. And for the first minute or so, you don't notice any difference, and you're tempted to turn off the video because nothing's happening, right? But by the time you've hit 2 minutes, you can see him, instead of being over to the side, he's starting to sit up more. And then by 3 minutes, his spasticity is decreased, his hand isn't clenched anymore, and he's sitting up. And I think it's by about the 4 minutes, you cannot visually tell that this gentleman has got Parkinson's. 4 minutes. And this is a best case scenario for certain, because he had the right medicine taken sublingually with that was easily taken up by the body, so everything was optimized in that situation. But it shows the potential in the medicine of being able to work so fast. Tincture is similar. When you take the tincture, it's in a vehicle of 190 proof grain alcohol usually. And because it's in that, you don't really want to take the tincture right in your mouth because it'll burn. But you take a little bit of water, in a juice glass or a shot glass, and you just take a little bit out of the faucet and put your squirt in there, and you drink it. And patients tell me that they are experiencing a lessening of their symptoms within about 10 minutes, and they're feeling pretty great by 15. And when they take it regularly as a preventative, the symptoms just don't come back throughout their day, which is of course the goal, right? The goal is not to let the symptoms get really bad and then take it and hope for the best. The goal is to get yourself on a schedule that you know about how long the cannabis lasts in your system, which is usually about 4 to 6 hours, and then schedule yourself to take small doses during the day so it keeps your symptoms at bay. It helps your brain clean itself so that the signaling in your body starts to be better, and so that you can avoid the symptoms entirely. So, with cannabis, one of the important aspects of it is to take what we call the whole plant, or whole plant medicine. There are some people who are selling CBD extracts, and you may have heard about this from friends or seen them on the internet. CBD stands for cannabidiol, which is one of the cannabinoids that's in the cannabis plant. And it's easily the second most popular after THC. And it's the one that's had probably the most research done on it at this point, besides THC. And because of the laws don't allow marijuana in some states still, some people are purchasing just CBD on its own over the internet and hoping that that will help them with their symptoms. I want to caution you from that, because for the medicine to work, you need all of the different constituents of the plant. You need the THC as part of it. You need the CBD, the cannabidiol, as part of it. You need the minor cannabinoids, which we don't even have them all identified. There's over 100 of them in the plant. And then you also need the terpenes, which is the aromatherapy of the plant. Over these thousands of years that humans have been taking the plant with us everywhere that we expand and travel over the world, we've gotten into a synergistic relationship with it. And so the plant, you know how corn has followed humans because we take corn everywhere we go, and as we go we're selecting the seeds for the corn that we most like. So that's the plant that we've come to know and love, especially now during the summer. Same thing happens with cannabis. Every time humans moved on, they took the seeds of the plants that made them feel the most healthy. And this happening again and again over tens of thousands of years means that the plant that exists right now is more uniquely refined to help our endocannabinoid system than it ever has before. So I tell you this to kind of inoculate you against suggestions from your friends of, oh, if you need cannabis medicine, just get this CBD extract online. You know, it's easy to do, and you can buy it online. It's just easy than going over town. Resist that temptation, because it's not the true cannabis medicine that's made of the whole plant. Yes?
What happens when you buy this and you buy the one that doesn't make you feel good? I went to the place and I told her what I needed. I didn't know what I needed. She told me what I needed. And I said, she said, do you want kind of makes you feel good? I said, no, I said, I don't want to feel good. I just want to feel, I mean, I didn't want to be high.
Correct.
I want to feel better. But
so if you go to a store and you buy something that you don't deem as appropriate for you, and so if it's got THC in it and it makes you feel high, unfortunately in Washington, you can't return it. And so you're kind of stuck. Your best bet would just be to try to create value in someone else by giving it to them. But you can't return it, and my best suggestion would be to certainly not work with that bud tender again at that shop, and try to find somebody who's more of an expert.
they didn't know what they were doing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't know what I was doing, so it was kind of a waste of time, and a very expensive waste of time.
And unfortunately, incredibly common. There are a lot of, unfortunately, they've got a very poor name. They're known as bud tenders, who help you when you go to the retail stores. And you know, certainly there are bud tenders that do their homework. They've gotten medically certified with the state. They work with patients on their free time, and they know what they're doing. But unfortunately, the ratio is very small to overall, because you know, a lot of folks, they're new to cannabis, and they just want it. They just want a job in cannabis, and that's an entry-level position, and so they get the job. Or they may be familiar with how to help certain kinds of patients, but not Parkinson's patients. So I recommend that you get as much of your information in advance, and then go asking for a specific product. For example, I like to recommend the capsules made by a company called the CPC. And the CPC has been making medicine all the way back years and years during the Washington medical industry days. And so they are one of the more reputable companies that transitioned to the recreational market. And so I know the formulator for the company, Ben, and he is an incredibly knowledgeable person who puts patients first. And so when you hear that kind of recommendation from somebody in the field who works with patients all the time, I recommend that you talk with me and others to find out what they're using that works for them for their Parkinson's, and then go pick up the same product. Because if you go into a store and just blindly ask for something with low THC and high CBD for your Parkinson's, if you get the wrong bud tender, you may not have a good experience right off the bat. That said, I encourage you to not give up if that happens to you, because the medicine does exist both in Washington and on Vashon. You just have to find the right source for you.
If you had Parkinson's, who would you go to?
Well, if I had Parkinson's, I would actually buy it locally here on the island from an herbalist that's local here. Now, this is where I also need to point out that that's technically illegal. And so since they got rid of the medical marijuana industry, it has taken a lot of herbalists who used to make custom medicine for patients and put them into the informal market. And so, and there's challenges with the recreational market, which is getting better, But again, just by its name, it's called the recreational market. We're about 18 months into having a recreational market, and mostly it's the kind of medicine that can be used for medicine for some people, but also a lot of people use it to party, right? And so the availability of medicine that is not made to also party on is still lacking in the market. That said, I bet you that 18 months from now, the market will be flush with it. Because companies, they respond to market demand, right? And unfortunately, the state, when the medical market was taking care of tens of thousands of people, enough that we had, over 1,000 stores just here in Washington. And not only did they went from over 1,000 stores down to, a little more than 300, but the people in this market were trained and driven to help patients and some people who were partying, but patients first. And the new market has got that in reverse, where because they wanted to establish some revenue first, they went with the low-hanging fruit, which for them was people who party. And now, after they've got that market established and they've got some income, now they're kind of circling around to patients, which are more difficult to design products for. It takes more effort, it takes more experience. And so to circle back to your question, if you can find an herbalist who has experience in the medical market, I would say go with somebody that you trust locally and shop local, right? Legally though, that exchange is not legal in Washington. And so if it's important to you to remain legal, then I recommend that you go to a recreational store that has a reputation for being more medical. And luckily for us, we have one that's nearby. Just here in West Seattle, there's a shop called Canna West Seattle. So that's C-A-N-N-A. Canna West Seattle, and they are on California Avenue, and they have, most of their staff has got the state medical certification, and the owner, Marianne actually used to own a reputable medical dispensary before they all got closed. So she's got her heart in the right place, and as the medical products come out and are released, she stocks them. So if you want to go somewhere close that understands patients, I can recommend Marianne's shop, Canna West Seattle, as being a place where you're more likely to get something appropriate than just walking in anywhere. You can also go on the State of Washington website and find out the stores that have received their medical certification from the state. Yes?
Don't you have to have a prescription?
No, actually.
You don't?
You don't. So you can go into stores and buy products that are deemed medical without having a prescription for it, because cannabis is now legal in the state. And so, because really all cannabis is medicine. It's just that some products are really made directly for patients versus for patients and to party on. And for example, the most common recommended dosage for Parkinson's patients is 10 milligrams of CBD and 5 milligrams of THC taken at the same time. And because it's whole plant, you're also getting a sprinkling of all the other cannabinoids that are in there as well. You're getting some terpenes and some flavonoids and some CBN and CBG and all these lesser known cannabinoids. But the two that will likely be written on the package is 10 milligrams of CBD and 5 milligrams of THC. Now, one of the reasons why I recommend tinctures is because I like to tell patients to buy one tincture that's all THC and one tincture that's all CBD. That way, you can play with the ratio yourself so that you find out what is the best ratio for you. For many Parkinson's patients, that ratio is 2 to 1. 2 parts CBD to every 1 part THC. The combination is supported by studies and by a lot of firsthand experience that I've just seen with patients. But you may find that you're more sensitive to THC and you don't want 5 milligrams at once. So maybe you'd rather take it more often during the day and have less THC. So for you, the 10 milligrams of CBD might be great, but instead of taking 5 milligrams, you'd actually prefer to have 2.5. So buying 2 tinctures, one that's THC and one that's CBD, you might find out has more flexibility to you. You're definitely going to find over time that you become more sophisticated with how you want to dose yourself. This takes some education. Even though we've been using the cannabis plant for tens of thousands of years, it's just coming back, right? And so the people who are making the medicine are relearning what was essentially a lost craft. The store employees are relearning not only how to talk to patients, but what to recommend. Patients ourselves, which I had a brain injury, and that's how that I got into medical cannabis. I had a brain injury, and so I had to learn about medical cannabis to help with my brain injury, and I had to learn the appropriate kind of cannabis and the dosing. So if you can, you know how people say about like a band, they were an instant success, they were instantly popular, but they don't know the band had been gigging and traveling for 10 years? It's like that. It's like, cannabis is a pretty reliable solution for Parkinson's symptoms, and with long-term use, decreasing even the cause. But you got to go through some legwork at the beginning to find the right dosage of the right product. But once you find the right dosage of the right product, it's actually quite, it's quite simple to moderate your symptoms. It's funny because I'm not supposed to say it's gonna help everybody, right? Because it doesn't. But as far as the people that I worked on Vashon, we're 11 for 12. That's pretty good results. And the one person who told me that they didn't care for it, I don't think that they were patient with learning their way through the dosing process. And so yeah, it's not a solution for everybody, but based on the people that I've talked with nationally and the people that I've talked with right here on Vashon, some people call it Parkinson's low-hanging fruit for cannabis because Parkinson's is so directly tied to the endocannabinoid system.
So I have a question.
Yes.
These patients who have had good responses, are they using other Parkinson's medications also?
Everybody I spoke to is using other Parkinson's medicines as well. Like I said at the beginning, I don't recommend that you get on the cannabis and then immediately get off of your scripts. But I know several patients that have. They have either decreased their dosage or gotten off them totally if they're very anti-pharmaceuticals. So at the beginning, they take both because there's no negative interplay that we've seen. The only negative interplay that we've seen is that with just a couple epilepsy drugs, there seems to be some interaction with high doses of CBD. But in the Parkinson's realm, I've come across no negative interaction. Yes, sir?
I don't want to change direction of this, but I wanted a quick answer. Besides Parkinson, I have dystonia. Can dystonia be helped with?
I am not as familiar with dystonia. Would you just tell me a little bit about it so that I understand what human system it works with?
It's inappropriate messages from the brain to the muscles, and they just go into spasm and stay there.
Okay, that's Yeah, so the short answer is, without having read the research, my immediate conclusion would be yes, and I'll tell you why. And I'm actually glad that you mentioned this because I missed this earlier in my notes. The thing, the main components of cannabis that we've been talking about today are THC and CBD. And one of the reasons that people love CBD and why it's used for a variety of patients is because it supports the body's signaling system. And our signaling system has to do with a lot of different problems. So I'll use pain as an example first. So CBD is often used for pain patients because while THC is an analgesic, and so it kind of dumbs down the pain, when someone has got endocannabinoid deficiency, let's say that you injure your leg, when the leg communicates to the brain that there's a problem, it sends it for the first time full force. Hey, we've got pain. You should be alert to the leg. And then after you recognize that, it's supposed to turn down the volume so that you continue to go get medical care, but it shouldn't be giving you that initial signal constantly. Well, with pain patients, we run into all the time that because they've got a weakened endocannabinoid system, the leg keeps on reporting back, we're in trouble, very loud every single time. And so the experience of their pain is severe. When they start taking CBD, it turns down the experience of pain because the signaling system is working more properly. The leg is calling out to the brain, hey, we got a problem. The brain says, okay, we've made a note of it, you can turn down your signal, and sends back. And so now, while you still might feel the pain, you don't feel it as intensely. Similarly, with muscle sets. So when you're experiencing muscle set clenching, say maybe the hand is clenching or the forearm is clenching, which then may be causing some amount of tremors, what you're experiencing is the brain sending a signal to the muscle set to clench. And it needs to be turned off because you don't want it to clench. And part of what can relieve this experience is having a healthy endocannabinoid system where the signaling between the brain and the muscle sets becomes optimized and rebalanced. And with that causes the relaxing. And this is why the gentleman who I started my talk talking about, who was cutting the lawn, that's what his experience is. He'd be all clenched up because there's this constant signal to tighten these muscle sets, and he would get sore from it, and then he'd get sore on his other side of his body in sympathy of that side. But then after he started taking this CBD whole plant medicine, that signaling system rebalanced itself, and so now the signal is no longer stuck on. Yes.
But you're talking now about an isolated cannabinoid. Are you saying, you're still saying take it with the THC?
Correct. Because, so the long and the short of it is that there is not as much research done on the entire family of cannabinoids yet for us to know what role the minor ones play. What we do know is if you give someone just CBD, they don't have the same response. And so we know that it's not the isolated molecule, and the studies that have been done with CBD in the presence of whole plant cannabinoids. And so it's the interplay between them. So without having read the specific research on your question, I would say that sounds like a signaling disorder that would be certainly helped by whole plant. Yes, sir.
So in your research that you've read, it's identified marijuana strains that will help you. Does it also identify strains that don't help you then?
So the research does not focus on particular strains. It focuses on molecular components of the plant. And so different strains will have more will have better effect for different patients. So, but knowing the strain mostly only helps patients who are smoking it, right? Because people smoke a particular strain, but when people buy products in the store, they're not usually identified by the strain. So if you were to go and buy a 2-to-1 capsule, 10 milligrams of CBD and 5 milligrams of THC, it won't say the strain name. It will identify the ingredients as molecules. It's got this much CBD, this much THC, and other minor cannabinoids, right? With that being said, if you were looking to source a strain, say for example you're a patient who wanted to grow their own medicine, which is very common on Vashon, I would recommend that you find a strain that is high in CBD and very low in THC, and then also find one and give that a try, but you're probably going to need additional THC, so then also grow another one that's just a THC strain, and then when you mix those together, that would be the right strain. There certainly are strains that naturally come out at 2-to-1. For example, the Harlequin strain is a very popular strain with Parkinson's patients that comes out naturally being 2 parts CBD to every 1 part THC. But I don't want to give you the impression that you need to go find the Harlequin strain, right? If you want to grow it, we can talk about where you might be able to get plants that naturally occur at 2-to-1, but really, as far as getting medicine goes, you're gonna buy it based on what the ingredients are molecularly in the package versus by a strain.
I see.
What does,
So it's all benefit, no negative.
Well, the only negative that I have come across for Parkinson's patients in cannabis is if you accidentally take more THC than you want, and you can have an over-medicated experience, right? Which also is also known as just getting stoned, right? So, and that is, there's a bit wide spectrum on that, right? There's medicinal doses for Parkinson's that work and you won't feel it at all. Some people need a little bit more, and you might get some of the cloudy headedness and appetite, and many people just feel like relief from stress, and that's actually a good thing. But then, if let's say that you're not on a schedule, and well, let's say you mess up your schedule. You normally take it 3 times a day, and because you have forgotten, you take it now, and then you take it again in a half hour. Suddenly you're doubling up on your THC, and at these low doses, you're probably not going to have an over-medication experience. But some patients need to take 20, 30, 40 milligrams of THC, which is, 8 times what I'm recommending. For that kind of a patient, if they accidentally take it and then take it again in a half hour, they could have what's at the far end. When you're having an over-medicated experience, which is not pleasant, you may experience paranoia. You'll probably experience a rapid heartbeat because it can lower your blood pressure a little bit. That might cause you to have some clammy sweats. And luckily I've only had that happen 3 times in my life. But the first 2 times I totally felt like maybe I should call the paramedics because my body was doing weird things. But as I got more educated, I realized that no one has ever died from cannabis. And your mind might be telling you that these are unfamiliar feelings and I need medical help. But if you just stick with it, go for a calm walk in your yard, lay down in your bed to try to take a nap, or there's some other good things you can do. You can smell black pepper. Black pepper tends to reduce the experience of cannabis, as well as drinking lemonade, because the citrine in the lemonade decreases your high as well. All things that you can do. And but if you get that high and you don't want to be, and it's negative, it's a drag, but it won't kill you, and you just gotta wait it out for 45 minutes, and then you'll come down and you're like, okay, I need to be more careful with my dosing regimen.
Well, that was one thing I was going to add, what you were saying that I didn't hear was edibles, 6 to 8 hours of experience with it.
If you take a really high dosage, if you take a really high dosage of edibles, you can't have a whole day thing. Now, if you were to go in and ask for an edible as a new patient for Parkinson's, there is no way that they should sell you a strong enough edible to get that high, right? That said, if you get an edible, and let's say it's a chocolate bar, right? And each of the little squares is 10 milligrams, and you're only supposed to take one square, right? And you eat it, right? That's good chocolate. And so then maybe you're tempted to take a second one. And then you start to get the munchies. You want to make sure you have something else to take, right? Or as the classic thing that happened, I forget the name of this senator, but early in cannabis legalization, she flew from some East Coast state to Colorado, and she bought a chocolate bar that was supposed to be 8 doses. And she didn't read the packaging. She didn't do her homework as a responsible patient. And when she got back in the van and they drove on, she ate the chocolate bar, just enjoying the chocolate bar, but she didn't realize it was 8 doses in one, and she had an intense experience. It was very unpleasant. She went to the hospital, you know, and it became national news. And one group of people are all like, see, marijuana medicine is dangerous. And then present marijuana patients were all like, she's being irresponsible with her medicine. You know, we wouldn't say that she was responsible if she didn't read the label and ate all her OxyContin either, right? We would say that's a patient error. Well, same thing with if you're you know, taking more than you're supposed to with THC as well. So yeah, if you're talking about, you know, the difference between 5 and 10 milligrams or 10 and 20 milligrams, we're talking about 45 minutes before you're feeling, you know, back at least a little more like yourself and not concerned. But in these type of cases, when you're trying to take 5 or 10 milligrams and you're taking 100 milligrams, that's a difficult day you're not going to probably enjoy. Or maybe enjoy a whole lot. Yes, sir. You have a question?
Thank you. Appreciate your energy.
Oh.
I don't know how you do it.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. And I love teaching about cannabis medicine, so I get enthusiastic.
I think it's financial kinds of things. How much does this tincture cost, and what's the insurance company starting to do, and medical too?
Sure, that's a really good question. Unfortunately, insurance companies will not come anywhere near this until it's federally legal. And so, unfortunately, that means that we got to all pay for it out of pocket, which is a drag. The recreational stores are presently more expensive than they were in the old medical days because they've got a lot more overhead, and you know, they've got to pay for advertising and things like that didn't really happen very much in the medical industry. So I would say that you know, a bottle of tincture in the recreational market will probably run you, you know, between $55 and $75, depending on the strength and who you buy it from and at what store.
Is there a litmus test, so to speak?
How do you mean a litmus test?
Can you get a tincture and tell that you got a tincture?
No, but they're all required to be tested by the state ahead of time, and so you can rely on how much is in each one.
Then I got another question. Would you make your own, like the brownie thing?
Yeah.
Even though you're not getting the same thing per brownie, if you're doing it over a course, aren't you still getting the same thing?
You would, but if you happen to get the brownie that's especially high in THC, and then this one's lower in THC, this one you might feel more high from than you want to be, because if you're trying to give yourself 10 milligrams of or 5 milligrams of THC, and for some reason when you were stirring it, the THC ended up in this corner, you can end up with a higher amount when you're doing it at home. So the capsules, depending again on who the producer is and what store you're buying it at, will float between $5 and $10 a capsule. which unfortunately capsules are still pretty high priced, especially if you want to be taking 3 a day, right? So that's unfortunate. But there's hope because prices are continually coming down in the recreational market because there's more producers and more competition and more people are making capsules. Plus, the companies are learning to be more efficient and to save their costs as well. In contrast, you know, I mentioned earlier that, you know, you can also buy locally because we happen to live on Vashon, where there are, you know, cannabis is historically our #1 cash crop on the island. And it's been that way since the 70s. And love it or hate it, it's been the truth of the matter. And we also have got a lot of good herbalists on the island. And, you know, there are places on the island that you can get tinctures for as little as $40 a bottle. And the important thing though is if you buy from family or friends or even make your own, I implore you to make sure that it's laboratory tested for its strength. Because you don't want to have an experience where either you're making your own tincture and the first time you make it it's weak and then you make it again and it's super potent and there's this disparity and so you give yourself a negative experience. And you want to, you know, part of medicine is repeatable results. And if you want repeatable results, you need to know what your variable A is. And so if you make your own, or if you buy it informally on the island, or from anywhere in the country, you know, make sure that the person who's producing it, the herbalist, has had it tested. And if you're going to make your own, it's really easy to have your products tested. Just right over here on the other side of the ferry at Analytical 360 is a lab that will do testing for, you know, any patient. You don't need an authorization. You just go in and you give them your stuff and say, you know, tell me how strong it is per drop or squirt, right? And any herbalist who's informally and illegally producing it on the island would be getting it lab tested as well because that person cares about their patients. Yes?
So I have 2 questions. Is it legal to grow your own?
So it is legal to grow your own in Washington if you have a patient authorization card from your doctor. If your doctor fills out a form that says that you have one of the corresponding illnesses, they check the box and they sign it, and that piece of paper gives you the right to grow 4 plants. If you then choose to sign up to the state's registry of patients, that 4 plants become 6. And if you have your doctor write on the authorization that you need more plants than what's allowed, and you get on the registry, you can grow up to 15 plants.
So you talked about some other conditions like fibromyalgia or anxiety. So your primary care doc might well give you authorization?
Your primary care doc may well. As a matter of fact, there are, I can't say all, but several of the doctors at the Vashon Clinic give authorizations. And also there's a naturopath that I refer folks to regularly who's very familiar with cannabis medicine and patients who I can give out his number to anybody who wants it. I must caution you from getting on the state's registry though if you want to preserve your privacy, because as we know the state is not very good with keeping things secret, and you know, all the tens of thousands of patients there are in Washington, I think we're only at 14,000 in the entire state that have signed up for it, and those are mostly people who are doing it because they want to pay less tax when you buy, because if you become a patient, you don't have to pay the sales tax.
So is it legal to smoke marijuana out there in the world? You know, in Seattle, on the streets of Seattle?
No, you're technically not supposed to smoke marijuana in the sight of other people. So you're supposed to be able to enjoy it at home, or if you're out by yourself in the wilderness, or but that's right now you're not even allowed to do cannabis social clubs in Seattle, where you're in because there's other people there, right? Now, do people do it all the time? Sure, but it's not legal technically. Technically, you're not supposed to do it within eyesight of other folks.
So all the information we're getting, can we get that online or?
So the information that I'm giving you is from years of experience, and so there probably isn't a particular place you're going to go online that's going to have synthesized it all like I am. You can certainly find out information. I mean, you can Google Parkinson's and cannabis, and you'll get a slew of information. A good part of it will be accurate. I like to recommend the website projectcbd.org. And as a matter of fact, right now on their homepage, they've got a big thing on Parkinson's and CBD for beginners, which is an excellent article. So that again is projectcbd.org. The information there is the best of the best. Their articles are written by people who know about cannabis, and also if you go to they've got a section on the website that says conditions, and it lists 50 conditions that cannabis can be used for. If you click on Parkinson's, it will take you to a page of all of the medical science that has been done into cannabis and Parkinson's, and you can actually read the study, not someone filtering the information for you, that's where I go to learn about dosing for patients. Because I don't want to read it filtered through somebody's article. I want to read the actual scientific study that was done in the UK, right? And so they have both on Project CBD's website. They have quality articles that are synthesizing this information, and they also have the original scientific papers that you can read as well.
So what's it called again? I'm not going to remember.
Sure. Well, we can get you a piece of paper and write it down when we're done here. So
I've actually got to go.
oh, well, hand me your newspaper. Oh, looks like she's going to give it to you. So, Project CBD is very reliable.
Okay. And Canna?
Oh, the store. The store, Canna, West Seattle.
And if I go in there and ask for a specialized mix of something, they'll do it?
Well, they can't compound like a pharmacy would, but they will know which of their products is most appropriate for you. And I was going to give them out at the end, but since you're leaving, let me give you one of my cards in case you want to ask a follow-up question, and also in case you're interested in being introduced to somebody on the island.
So do you act as a consultant, so we would actually hire you, and then you help with the dosage and finding this anomalous on the island, that kind of thing?
I do this all as volunteer work. I make my money through my podcast and through paid speaking engagements. And I teach patients because I think it's important. So
could you give us the name of some herbalist on the island, or?
Sure, after the meeting when it's a little more one-to-one, I would be happy to tell you more about where you could get it on the island and who to talk to.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't mind those type of questions in an email or something?
No, I don't mind those questions in an email. Just nothing via Facebook, because that's not secure for any kind of health discussion.
It's a waste of time.
Yeah, totally. So, right on.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So before the whole thing went, the whole licensing, all that came, I had my papers and I would buy bits of things, and somehow a lot of it never got used.
Mm-hmm.
How long does that stuff keep?
So if it's flower itself, like the buds, like for smoking, that slowly degrades over time because the aromatherapy of it, the smell of it, is part of the medicine, and it degrades over time. So maybe the flowers will stay really medicinal for a year.
This is more like tinctures and
So things like that, tinctures will be shelf stable, easily a year. Sometimes they'll add additives that make it less shelf stable, like if they've added like raspberry flavorings or something like that. But a very clean medicine, like say for example a full cannabis extract in alcohol, in a dark container, kept in a dark area or home, not on the shelf, that could stay good for 2 or 3 years because it stopped degrading. Things like edibles and capsules, it depends on what they're made out of. But once the cannabis is taken out of the plant and put in alcohol, it becomes very shelf stable. So.
Excuse me, does this meet every first Friday?
Yes.
I'll be there.
Thank you.
First Friday of the month, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So are there any other questions before we wrap up?
It amazes me how much money could be collected by the government if they made marijuana not, you'd have to have a prescription done and you have to pay for it, and you're paying an awful lot even if you're making it yourself.
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean,
That, you could have every school in the United States back.
Just in our own state, they tax it 37% before the sales tax. And so that's a lot of money being raised. At the same time, a 37% tax is coming out of our pockets as patients. So that's kind of a drag too, because if they decrease the taxes, patients wouldn't have to pay so much. But you're right, there's a lot of money to be raised in taxes.
Excuse me.
That's a festive phone ring you got there. Right on. Well, then I'll be around for a few minutes for questions if anybody has them kind of informally on the side. Thank you very much for having me here and for letting me share.